Mark stood at his kitchen window, the morning sun glinting off the deceptively tranquil surface of his backyard pool. It was a beautiful pool, a gleaming sapphire in the otherwise emerald tapestry of his meticulously kept lawn. For years, it had been his sanctuary, a silent companion to his morning coffee, a cool embrace on sweltering summer afternoons. Now, it was a battleground. He sipped his coffee, the warmth doing little to thaw the knot of ice that had taken root in his stomach. The tranquility was a lie. He could still hear the phantom echoes of laughter that wasn't his, the splash of bodies he hadn't invited, the shrill, demanding cries of children who treated his private oasis as their personal water park. And above it all, the voice. Karen. Karen lived next door, her sprawling, slightly neglected property a stark contrast to Mark's ordered domain. She was, in every sense of the word, a force of nature, a Category 5 hurricane wrapped in a tie-dye t-shirt and armed with an unshakable belief in her own righteousness. Her 4 children, ranging from a boisterous 7-year-old boy, Leo, to a surprisingly agile 2-year-old girl, Lily, were miniature extensions of her chaotic philosophy. They were, in Karen's words, free spirits, a designation that, in practice, meant unsupervised agents of suburban destruction. The problems had started subtly, a year after Mark moved into the quiet cul-de-sac. A stray ball over the fence, quickly retrieved with an apology. Then, a few of Karen's kids, Leo and his slightly older sister, Mia, had accidentally scaled the low wooden fence to retrieve a lost toy, leaving a muddy footprint on his pool deck. Mark, a generally good-natured man who valued peace above all else, had smiled, waved, and simply asked them to be more careful. He even reinforced the fence, adding an extra foot of lattice. He thought it would be enough. He was wrong. The lattice became a ladder. The occasional trespass became a daily occurrence. Mark installed higher fencing, warning signs, even a motion-activated sprinkler system that Karen angrily declared terrorized her innocent babies. Each attempt at a solution was met with either defiant disregard or a venomous lecture about how he was stifling children's natural curiosity and being unneighborly. "It's just a pool, Mark," she'd screeched over the fence one afternoon, her face red with indignation as he gently shooed Leo and his friend, who were attempting to use his pool noodle as a jousting lance, back to their own yard. "Kids are going to play. You're going to build a fortress around your yard? Honestly, it's just so cold." Mark had tried reasoning. "Karen, this is my property. There are safety concerns. What if one of them gets hurt?" Her laugh was dismissive. "Oh, please. They're supervised. Mostly. And they're good swimmers. Leo's practically an Olympian. Besides, it's not like you use it all the time. It's sitting there, practically begging for children to enjoy it." That was the crux of it. In Karen's world, if something existed and could bring her children joy, it automatically became communal property. His pool, his private investment, his sanctuary, was now, in her eyes, a public amenity. The last straw had come a week ago. Mark had been away for a long weekend, a rare escape he desperately needed. He returned on Sunday evening, exhausted but refreshed, only to find his backyard transformed into a scene of utter chaos. The new, 6-foot privacy fence he'd installed had a section clearly kicked in. His pool, usually crystal clear, was murky green, filled not just with leaves, but with deflated pool toys, a child's discarded shoe, and, most horrifyingly, a half-eaten hot dog bobbing listlessly. The worst part was the small, brightly colored inflatable unicorn flow tie, one he didn't own, tangled in the pump filter. He pulled it out, and as he did, a wave of pungent, chlorine-tinged urine smell hit him. Someone had clearly used his pool as a giant, unsupervised toilet. His rage, usually a slow burn, ignited into a furious inferno. He stomped over to Karen's house, not even bothering with the fence this time, and hammered on her front door. It swung open to reveal Karen, a wine glass in hand, her eyes slightly glazed over, a faint smile on her lips. Behind her, the sounds of children shrieking and a television blaring. "Mark, what a surprise! Did you have a good trip?" she chirped, genuinely oblivious. "Karen," he managed, his voice tight with suppressed fury. "Go look at my pool. Now!" The roar of the mini excavator reached Karen just as she was pouring her first, much-needed mug of coffee. It was a sound that vibrated through the very foundations of her house, rattling the cheap ceramic mugs in the cupboard and making Lily, who was meticulously stacking blocks on the living room floor, shriek with alarm. Karen scowled, clutching her coffee tighter. What in the world was that racket? She peered out her kitchen window, squinting against the morning sun. Her jaw dropped, the coffee nearly sloshing over the rim of her mug. Across the yard, at Mark's place, a scene of utter demolition was unfolding. Dust plumed into the air like a grotesque mushroom cloud, and a monstrous yellow machine was tearing into the familiar blue expanse of his pool. The pristine white coping, which she had always admired, was now jagged, shattered concrete. The excavator's bucket, a gaping metallic maw, was chewing through the very heart of the pool, ripping up tiles and sending debris flying. "What is he doing?" she whispered, her voice laced with disbelief. It couldn't be. Mark, her quiet, somewhat eccentric neighbor with the perfectly manicured lawn and the gorgeous pool, was destroying it. Her mind raced, struggling to process the visual assault. This was his pool. The one her children loved. The one that, frankly, she considered a valuable neighborhood amenity, even if Mark was ridiculously uptight about sharing. She felt a surge of indignant rage. How dare he? Without a word, without a warning? After all the times her kids had brought life and joy to his sterile backyard, he was just annihilating it. It was a personal affront, a direct attack on her and her free spirits. "Leo! Me! Kids! Get over here! Look at this!" she yelled, her voice already taking on a shrill edge. Her children, roused by the unusual commotion and their mother's agitated tone, scrambled to the window. Leo, always the most boisterous, gasped, "Mom, what's happening to Mr. Mark's pool? Is he breaking it?" Mia, ever the pragmatic one, looked genuinely confused. "But why? It's a nice pool." Karen didn't answer them, her eyes fixed on Mark, who stood on his back porch, a silhouette against the rising dust. He wasn't even looking at her house. He was just watching, a strange, grim satisfaction etched on his face, even from this distance. "That man," Karen seethed, the word dripping with venom. "That absolutely petty, selfish man." She slammed her coffee mug down, making Lily jump. "He's doing this to punish us. To punish you." Her children, sensing the dramatic shift in their mother's mood, began to whine and cling. Lily started crying, her little face crumpling. Leo, usually fearless, looked genuinely crestfallen, his dreams of cannonballing into Mark's pool evaporating with each swing of the excavator. But where will we swim, Mommy?" Leo whined, tugging on her shirt. "It's summer. We always swim at Mr. Mark's." "Not anymore, darling," Karen said, her voice dripping with mock sympathy, though her eyes blazed with fury. "Because Mr. Mark is a mean man who hates fun. He's taking away your joy." She grabbed her phone, her fingers flying across the screen. This was unacceptable. This was beyond unneighborly. This was an act of war, and Karen was not one to back down from a fight. She started a new post on the neighborhood's online forum, her thumbs hammering out an impassioned, albeit entirely one-sided, account of Mark's supposed atrocity. Mark heard Karen before he saw her. the faint wail of a child, then Karen's voice, rising in volume and indignation, carried over the din of the machinery. He turned, a flicker of something akin to grim anticipation in his eyes. She burst through her back door, practically ran across her yard, and was now standing at the remains of the old fence line, her arms crossed, her face a mask of furious disbelief. Leo and Mia trailed behind her, their faces etched with confusion and sadness, while Lily clung to Karen's leg, sniffling. Karen stood frozen at the edge of her yard, the roar of the excavator a physical assault on her ears, each chunk of concrete ripped from Mark's pool a fresh stab of betrayal. Her children's sniffling complaints were a distant hum beneath the mechanical devastation. Her carefully constructed world, where her desires were paramount and her children's whims were a divine mandate, was crumbling faster than Mark's pool deck. "This can't be happening," she muttered, not to her children, but to herself, her voice thin and reedy against the industrial cacophony. She'd always managed to bend reality to her will. A sharp word to a manager, a tearful plea to a school principal, a thinly veiled threat about a Yelp review. These were her weapons, and they had rarely failed. But Mark, with his quiet stubbornness and his monstrous yellow machine, was an immovable object. She pulled her bewildered children back into her house, her mind already spinning with a vengeful fury. The humiliation of being verbally cornered, of having her accusations calmly dismantled in front of an amused construction worker, burned like a brand. She hadn't just lost a pool, she had lost face. And Karen, above all else, could not tolerate losing. The first thing she did was consult the neighborhood forum. Her earlier, hastily typed post about Mark's supposed child-hating act had already garnered a few comments, a mix of sympathy from fellow parents who often tolerated her children's antics, and a surprising number of questions about why Mark would go to such an extreme. A few anonymous users even dared to suggest that perhaps Mark had good reasons. The nerve! Karen quickly drafted a new, more elaborate post. This one was crafted with a theatrical flair, painting Mark as a tyrannical ogre, an unhinged recluse driven by a pathological hatred of joy and children. She exaggerated wildly, claiming he had tormented her kids for merely looking at his pool, that he had installed razor wire, the lattice, and booby traps, the sprinklers, and that this demolition was an act of pure unadulterated spite. She ended with a dramatic call to action, urging the neighborhood to stand with her against this unprecedented act of neighborly cruelty. Her phone buzzed almost immediately with replies. Some were supportive, echoing her outrage, fueled by similar, albeit less dramatic, experiences with difficult neighbors. Others were more cautious, hinting at a two sides to every story sentiment. And then there were the direct messages. One, from a user she didn't recognize, simply read, "Maybe your kid shouldn't have been peeing in his pool, Karen." Her blood ran cold. The specific accusation, coming from an anonymous source, felt like a direct punch to the gut. Had Mark actually told people? Or had one of her children, in an unguarded moment, let something slip? She dismissed the thought. Her children knew better. This was Mark, spreading malicious rumors. She stewed in her indignation for the rest of the day, the rhythmic thudding and grinding from Mark's yard a constant, irritating reminder of her defeat. Her children, deprived of their expected aquatic adventures, were particularly restless. Leo and Mia bickered endlessly, Lily cried more than usual, and the house felt small, stifling. "Mommy, can we go to the pool?" became a constant refrain, each utterance a fresh wound to Karen's ego. "No, darlings, you can't," she'd snap, then soften her tone with a forced smile. "Because Mr. Mark is being a very naughty man and taking away your fun. But don't worry, Mommy will think of something." That something began to coalesce in her mind as the sun set, casting long, accusing shadows across Mark's half-demolished yard. The pool was gone, but the battle wasn't over. This was merely a tactical retreat, a sacrifice on Mark's part that she would turn into his ultimate downfall. The next morning, the demolition crew was gone, leaving behind a massive, raw crater in Mark's backyard, surrounded by piles of broken concrete and fresh earth. Mark himself was out there, directing a different crew, who began the arduous process of leveling the ground and preparing for grass seeding. Karen watched him, a slow, predatory smile spreading across her face. He had won the battle of the pool, but she would win the war for his sanity. Her first move was subtle. She started leaving her garbage cans out on the curb for days after collection, directly across from Mark's driveway. Then came the accidental watering of his prized rose bushes with her sprinkler system set to maximum power well into the afternoon. When he politely asked her to adjust it, she feigned innocence. "Oh, Mark, I'm so sorry. I must have forgotten. The children were distracting me." Then came the noise. Not loud parties, but carefully curated irritations. Early morning lawnmower sessions that started at 6 a.m., even on weekends. Leaving her dog, a high-strung terrier mix, tied in the backyard. The hiss of air escaping Leo's soccer ball echoed in Karen's ears, a sound more devastating than the roar of Mark's excavator. It wasn't just a deflated toy. It was a brazen act of war, a direct assault on her children, on her very authority. Her face, usually a canvas for indignation, contorted into a mask of pure, unadulterated fury. Leo's choked sob, Mia's wide, terrified eyes, and Lily's confused whimper only served to amplify her outrage. You monster!" Karen shrieked, bending down to snatch the limp, orange sphere from the ground. "You deflated my son's ball! What kind of sick, twisted individual does something like that?" Mark didn't even turn around. He continued to meticulously prune a sprig of rosemary, his back a rigid, unyielding wall. "The kind of individual who has had enough, Karen," he called back, his voice disturbingly calm. "Consider it a preview of what happens when you deliberately cross my boundaries." Karen felt a hot flush crawl up her neck. This wasn't the Mark she knew, the quiet, easily exasperated man who would eventually retreat. This was a new Mark, sharper, colder, and utterly unafraid. The sheer audacity of his act, the casual cruelty of it, shook her to her core. He had humiliated her in front of her children, wounded them directly. This was no longer just about a pool or a garden. This was personal. She stormed back into her house, the deflated ball clutched like a ruined trophy. Her children followed, a chorus of misery. "Mommy, Mr. Mark broke my ball," Leo wailed, tears streaming down his face. "He's a bad man, Mommy," Mia added, her voice trembling. Karen hugged them fiercely, a theatrical display of maternal protection. "I know, darlings, I know. He is a very, very bad man. But Mommy is going to fix this. Mommy is going to make him pay for hurting you." Her mind churned, moving past the trivial retaliations of sprinklers and loud music. Mark had escalated, and she would escalate further. She thought about the invasive bamboo. He was worried about its roots? She would give him something real to worry about. That evening, a package arrived from an online retailer, a large, discreet box filled with what appeared to be industrial-grade weed killer. The kind that promised to eradicate root systems and leave nothing but barren earth. She had spent hours researching, driven by a vengeful obsession. This wasn't just about his garden. It was about destroying his sense of order, his precious peace. Under the cloak of darkness, Karen crept out into her backyard. The moon was a sliver, casting long, eerie shadows. She moved stealthily to the fence line, carefully parting the growing bamboo stalks. On Mark's side, his new garden slumbered, serene and vulnerable. The small koi pond, A glimmering patch in the moonlight seemed to mock her. With gloved hands, she began to apply the potent liquid. She didn't just target the bamboo roots peeking through. No, that would be too simple. She meticulously sprayed the perimeter of Mark's garden, the nascent herbs, the lavender, the delicate new grass that was just beginning to carpet the former pool area. She even contemplated splashing some into the koi pond, but a fleeting thought of accidental harm to living creatures and the potentially severe legal consequences gave her pause. This was about property, not animal cruelty. Yet, she worked for nearly an hour, the acrid smell of chemicals stinging her nostrils. When she was finished, she wiped her brow, a triumphant, almost manic grin on her face. Mark wanted consequences? She was delivering a whole garden load of them. The next morning, Mark emerged for his usual coffee ritual, expecting to enjoy the cool morning air and the sight of his thriving new garden. Instead, he was met with a horrifying sight. Patches of his meticulously nurtured plants were already wilting, their leaves curling and browning in an unnatural way. The newly seeded grass was dotted with suspicious yellowing spots. And along the fence line, where the invasive bamboo had been, was a stark, almost pristine line of scorched earth. His jaw tightened. He knew instantly what had happened. He knelt down, examining a dying lavender bush, the soil around it dry and crusty. The smell of harsh chemicals, faint but unmistakable, hung in the air. This wasn't natural. This was deliberate. This was Karen. He walked over to the fence, his eyes scanning her yard. Karen was conspicuously absent, her curtain still drawn. He stood there for a long moment, not with rage, but with a cold, clear resolve. She had crossed a line. A significant, potentially illegal line. He didn't yell. He didn't make a scene. He simply pulled out his phone and started taking pictures, documenting every dying plant, every yellowing patch of grass, the distinct chemical burn along the fence line. He then collected soil samples, placing them in small, labeled baggies. Later that day, a landscaper Mark had hired confirmed his suspicion. The patrol cars' flashing blue and red lights painted the facade of Karen's house with an accusing glow, a stark, unwelcome beacon in the quiet cul-de-sac. Her children, peeking from behind the living room curtains, whispered nervously, their innocent faces etched with fear. Karen's forced smile had vanished, replaced by a desperate, trapped look. The officer's words, "Coming voluntarily, or do we need to escalate this?" hammered in her skull. "Escalate?" Karen's voice was a brittle whisper, completely devoid of its usual bluster. "What are you talking about? This is a misunderstanding. Mark is he's being dramatic." The male officer, who had remained silent until now, stepped forward, his voice calm but firm. "Mrs. Davies, Mr. Thompson has filed a report outlining repeated instances of trespassing by your children, property damage to his pool, and now the deliberate application of a highly corrosive chemical agent to his garden, resulting in significant financial loss. This is no longer a dramatic neighborly dispute. This is a criminal investigation." Karen's eyes darted wildly, searching for an escape, a loophole, anything to regain control. The street was quiet, but she could feel the weight of unseen eyes, the whispers from behind closed blinds. Her reputation, meticulously cultivated over years of performative motherhood and neighborhood gossip, was teetering on the brink. I didn't apply any chemicals," she stammered, clutching her flimsy nightgown tighter. "And the kids, they just played. Kids play. It's natural." "Mrs. Davies," the female officer interrupted, holding up a small, clear baggie containing a soil sample. "Mr. Thompson provided us with this. It will be sent for analysis. He also has photographs of the damage, eyewitness testimony from the demolition crew regarding the state of his pool, and a landscaper's report confirming the nature of the chemical damage." We have more than enough probable cause to bring you in for questioning." The word, arrest, hung unspoken in the air, a cold, heavy truth. Karen looked at her children, their small faces peering anxiously from the window. The thought of them seeing her led away in handcuffs, of the neighborhood chatter, of the inevitable judgment, it was a fate worse than any deflated soccer ball. "Fine," she choked out, her shoulders slumping in defeat. I'll come. But this is all a huge mistake. A huge, terrible mistake." As she walked toward the patrol car, a sudden, almost magnetic force compelled her to glance at Mark's house. His windows were dark, his property silent, save for the hum of the cooling night air. He wasn't there to gloat, to witness her humiliation. That fact, oddly, made it even worse. His absence felt like a silent, powerful judgment. The police station was a sterile, unforgiving environment, a stark contrast to the cozy chaos of her home. The interrogation room was worse. A small, windowless space with a metal table and two uncomfortable chairs. The officers were polite, professional, but their questions were relentless, dissecting her every denial, every attempt to deflect blame. "Mrs. Davies, are you aware that purposefully damaging a neighbor's property with chemicals could lead to felony charges, depending on the extent of the damage? Did you instruct your children to trespass on Mr. Thompson's property, or were you aware of their frequent visits to his pool? Can you explain why, despite repeated requests from Mr. Thompson, you failed to control your children or address the damage they caused?" Each question was a carefully aimed arrow, piercing her defenses. Karen tried to stick to her narrative of victimhood, of a mean neighbor and innocent children, but the officers had facts, dates, and photographic evidence. The story of the hot dog and the unicorn floatie came up, and for the first time, Karen felt a genuine blush of shame, not for her children, but for herself, for her cavalier dismissal of Mark's legitimate complaints. Hours passed. The initial shock gave way to exhaustion, then to a creeping, chilling realization. Mark wasn't playing games anymore. He had meticulously built his case, documented everything, and now, the full, undeniable weight of his grievances was crashing down on her. The world wasn't just pushing back, it was burying her under a landslide of consequences. Finally, after what felt like an eternity, Karen was released, but not without conditions. A formal warning for trespassing, a citation for property damage, pending soil analysis results, and a strict injunction to stay away from Mark's property and ensure her children did the same. The officer's parting words were a grim prophecy. "Mrs. Davies, if there are any further incidents, the consequences will be far more severe. We recommend you seek legal counsel." She stumbled out of the station into the pre-dawn darkness, the cool air doing little to clear the fog of fear and humiliation. Her phone buzzed. It was. The aftermath of Karen's police station ordeal settled over the Davies household like a shroud, suffocating the usual clamor and replacing it with a tense, brittle silence. David, still fuming from the argument that stretched into the early hours, barely spoke to her. He went to work with a grim set to his jaw, leaving Karen alone with the bewildered children and the crushing weight of her own making. The vibrant chaos that usually defined their home felt hollow, replaced by a dull dread. Leo, Mia, and Lily, sensing the profound shift in their parents' dynamic and the ominous quiet from Mark's yard, were uncharacteristically subdued. The usual demands for the pool were replaced by anxious questions about the police car, about why Mommy was so sad, and about why Mr. Mark wasn't being friendly anymore. Karen tried to soothe them with platitudes, but her heart wasn't in it. Her usual well of performative maternal cheer had run dry, replaced by a terrifying glimpse into a future where her actions had undeniable, painful repercussions. The full extent of the immediate damage became apparent that afternoon. A registered letter arrived, not from Mark, but from a law firm. It was a formal cease and desist order detailing the history of trespassing, the property damage to the pool and fence, and the recent chemical attack on his garden. It warned of a lawsuit for damages, a claim for emotional distress, and potential criminal charges if the injunction to stay away from Mark's property was violated again. The final paragraph was a demand for reimbursement for the entire cost of the pool demolition, garden restoration, and legal fees. The figures made Karen's head spin. She called David at work, her voice trembling. "David, you won't believe this. Mark's suing us. He's demanding everything." David's reply was cold, distant. "I told you this would happen, Karen. You didn't listen. Send me the letter. I'll forward it to our lawyer." "Our lawyer?" Karen scoffed. "We don't have our lawyer. We have a guy who looked at some paperwork for us once. This is serious, David. It is serious, Karen. That's why I'm talking to a real lawyer today. One who handles actual disputes. I suggest you start preparing yourself for the consequences you created." He hung up before she could protest further. The call with their actual family lawyer, a mild-mannered man named Mr. Henderson, who usually handled wills and property deeds, was even more chilling. He listened patiently as Karen recounted her version of events, glossing over her more egregious actions, painting Mark as the aggressor. But Mr. Henderson was not easily swayed. "Mrs. Davies," he said, his voice grave, "Mr. Thompson's lawyer has already provided me with a detailed file. It includes police reports, photographs, a landscaper's affidavit, and a clear timeline of events. They even have copies of your social media posts from the neighborhood forum, which, I must say, do not paint you in a favorable light regarding your characterization of Mr. Thompson." Karen felt a flush of heat. "My social media? He's stalking me?" "No, Mrs. Davies. He's documenting your public statements. And unfortunately, in combination with the physical evidence, they paint a very strong case for intentional property damage and harassment. The chemical use, in particular, is a significant issue. Depending on the type of herbicide and its long-term impact on the soil, you could be looking at a very substantial claim, not just for the garden, but for the ecological damage." He then outlined the potential legal and financial ramifications. Not only were they facing a civil lawsuit that could cost them their savings, but the criminal charges for property damage were still very much on the table. The invasive bamboo, he explained, could also lead to further liability if it spread to Mark's property and caused structural damage or impacted his new pond. "My advice, Mrs. Davies," Mr. Henderson concluded, "is to settle this as quickly and quietly as possible. Any escalation will only make things worse for you. You are in a very difficult position." Settlement. The word tasted like ash in Karen's mouth. It meant admitting defeat, accepting responsibility, and paying a fortune. Everything she had fought against. But the fear was real. For the first time, the consequences were not abstract threats or distant possibilities. They were tangible, immediate, and potentially ruinous. Meanwhile, Mark, far from gloating, was methodically rebuilding his life. The area where the pool once stood was slowly transforming. The scorched earth from Karen's chemical attack was being carefully excavated and replaced with fresh, nutrient-rich soil. He wasn't just planting a new garden. He was building a sanctuary, a new testament to his reclaimed peace. He installed a state-of-the-art security system, complete with high-definition cameras covering every inch of his property line, explicitly for Doc.